it wasn't just the fact that I recognised very early on that I was different to probably everybody, and I was aware that everyone's an individual, quite young, but I was extremely difficult and different as a kid. So, for instance, the first time I ran away from home, I was 2, which is quite crazy. Like, I don't, I don't. It's difficult because my mum and dad are still alive. My family is still alive, but it was a difficult family to live in. It was quite a violent and aggressive home. So whether that's a reason why I was often away with the fairies or not, I don't know. What the cause of that is, I don't know. But I was quite aware of my difference, especially with other kids, because to me it seemed like everybody just went along with what they were told, and I questioned everything, and I had to be free always. I had to be, no, I'm doing this. You lot go that way. I'm going this way. And I didn't notice the like I thought it was normal in my family for a long time. The sort of difficult part of it, how angry and violent it was. It was when I was about 8 that I stayed at a friend's. I went after school. Maybe 7. I went after school and I played and had dinner at my friend's house. And I remember sitting there at the table, and I could feel, when all families pretend when there's a guest, so they might clear up, they might act really nice in front of a guest, but it wasn't like that, and I could sense it. It was like that was how they naturally were. They accepted each other. Even the children were important. Their voices, what they were saying, they weren't smothered or told to shut up or threatened. And I suddenly thought, oh, is this what a family's supposed to be? And then it started reflecting on me that actually where I am isn't really good for me or right. But my mother was very concerned with me being like seen as different. So she was always trying to hide that from people. So I wasn't allowed to be dyslexic. I wasn't allowed to have something wrong with me because it was somehow a reflection on her of her not having a child that wasn't as good as she'd hoped, or as normal as she'd hoped. But she was very aware that I was free from the beginning, and it was very difficult to control me or tell me what to do. For instance, at 2, the age of 2, a lot of things happened. Like we had a milkman who used to come in to our little cul-de-sac, and he knew all the parents, all the kids. There's different times back then. He'd come in, he'd talk to all the parents, do his milk round, and the kids would jump in the milk float. He'd drive to the end of the street, and we'd all jump out and run back. But I was the only one who was watching him. The kids were doing it for the ride, but I was watching him like, how do you operate this? And then one day he was stood there talking to my mum and dad, and in front of them, I climbed in his milk float and stole it and drove, and I was 2, which is quite crazy if you think about it.
Blimey.
Yeah. I could reach the steering wheel at full stretch while standing on the pedal, but I had to take the handbrake off with both hands because it was strong, it was stiff, And I was heading straight to the end of the street where there was parked cars. And he was like a sort of an unfit mid-30s guy. And these machines haven't got any doors. And I clearly remember him running up level with the milk float, like white, like he'd seen a ghost, terrified. And he just about caught me, got on, lifted me off the pedal, sat me down just before I hit the parked cars at the end.
Goodness.
But I was born with no fear at all. None. Like,
that is a startling memory from childhood.
yeah,
and it's still clear as day to
yeah,
you.
so clear. Do you know I've got memories from before I was one, like really strange. Like once I said to my mum, where was that place that your sister Jackie lived, my auntie, where she had a flat and there was a front room and you went through and then there was a white room with a chest of drawers and some Fisher Price toys on the top and a staircase that went spiraled around like clockwise. And she said, "How you can't remember that? How do you remember that?" And I said, "I remember it totally. I remember walking up the stairs and my auntie saying, 'Come on, you can't come up here, come back down.' And I'd sit on the floor playing my cousin who was about 3 months younger or 2 months younger than me. But she seemed like a baby to me. But I was a baby the same, it was only a few months. So from very, very young, I was running before I was one. Running, not crawling or walking. When I was 9 months old, I was running around. So I kind of have an understanding that it must have been difficult for my mum, because she was probably like, "What the hell is this? Like, how we got to watch this kid 24/7?"
And you said you had no fear.
Yeah.
And you said you needed freedom.
Yeah.
Freedom and no fear.
Yeah.
As a potent mix.
Yeah. Very dangerous, I suppose, for a parent, in a parent's eyes.
But as an adult, those are two concepts or ways of looking at the world that we admire. We're like, I would love to have no fear. I would love to have freedom all the time. That's what we aspire to.
Yeah, yeah.
But as a kid,
it's strange, isn't it, to get your head round? And it's funny because I didn't lose that through my life. Like, it was very tough for me in school because I knew and I recognised that school was kind of trying to take away the kid inside me. And it was like trying to beat me down and take my colours away, my energy and my spirit and my freedom, trying to make me fear things. I was abused in all ways at school, and I went to 5 schools, and out of 5 schools, 4 of them I got abused in certain ways, physically, mentally, spiritually, and sexually. So it was tough for me because the only place I felt safe was when I walked to school and walked home, which for most kids is the most dangerous time because they're alone. But for me, that was my safe place, and I'd listen to my music, and it was like I was going into battle, like getting ready, because I didn't know what would happen. And adults...
Well, either way.
Yeah, and it seemed like adults would lash out without thinking, and I could see the dangers of that, like, a couple of times it was really bad, really, really bad, and I had to keep my mouth shut, and actually lie to protect the people who'd abused me.
What about your friends, or the kids you knocked around with, or the kids in the cul-de-sac? Did you feel different from them too?
Yeah, always. And I found it very hard to make friends. I don't know if that was because I was always moving, but I remember even before I moved the first time, I could play with kids, but I didn't see them as like having a best friend. They were just other people, and I couldn't relate to no one. It was like I didn't need anyone. I know that sounds strange, but I felt like I was okay with just me, and I could play or interact with anyone, but I didn't need their acceptance. I didn't need their recognition. I didn't need,
So you weren't a loner because you could interact with anyone. You were happy to knock around with whoever.
Yeah.
But you didn't need them.
Yeah. I was kind of like, I probably was looked at as a loner by a lot of people, a lot of kids, because I wouldn't attach myself to anything. So So, for instance, when I remember when I was in secondary school, and I was about from the age of sort of 12, I really started noticing. So I'd sit in the playground at lunchtimes, and I'd watch all the kids, and I'd see all the groups of kids that there were like the kids who played chess, like a chess club. There were the kids who kicked a tennis ball round the playground. There were the kids who went to the end of the field and smoked cigarettes. You know, there were the popular kids, the unpopular kids. They all sort of grouped up. And I'd know and get on with one or two from each group, but I wouldn't be a part of any group. And I remember watching them and realising they all had the same thing in common, was that none of them were brave enough to be themselves. None of them. Because they all needed to be accepted by the group. So they were all trying to be or say or act or do what they thought the others needed from them. Not to be not funny enough or not clever enough, or you know what I mean? So it was like they were always judging themselves from what they thought the others were judging them from.
And looking back now, from your adult point of view, looking at that child sitting in the playground looking at the other groups of kids, do you feel sorry for that kid that you were?
I did for a long time. But it's funny because I had some kind of tough experiences where I was on the street, living on the street, and it was like almost, I could say it was like a spiritual experience. And I really, because it was like I stripped everything away. I had nothing. I just had a few bags of clothes, and I had no house to make me feel safe. I had no family that I felt loved by. I had no girlfriend that I had a good relationship and a bond with. I had no job that gave me an empowerment. I had no possessions that gave me ownership. And I felt this warmth in me that was like kind of an internal happiness. That was the first time I realised what real happiness was. And that actually most people are tricked and their happiness is external. So they've got a car they got a nice car and a nice house and and that makes them happy. But inside, what's going on in there? It's like, so I realised that without all those things, I started to see myself much more clearer. And then I started to realise that actually all those experiences I went through, as tough as they were, and without comparing to other people, because obviously there's people in the world who have had terrible, terrible sufferings and still are, even now, all over the world. So it was, for me, it was like an enlightenment where I realised that actually you get what you get, and it makes you who you are, or it breaks who you are. And it's okay to fall down, because it's the building up that realigns you. Because kids are like buildings, really. If they got a bad foundation, it's like a wonky building, and they spend the whole life trying to straighten up. So it was the realisation I didn't need sympathy, and I didn't need to feel sorry for myself, because actually it was like, you know what, if I had to start again, I'd do the whole thing again, because I'm really happy that I'm me. I really am, because it's given me so much. So many ways of seeing things, and how I can look through someone else's perspective of what they're going through, like humility and an understanding and a strong love for people. And yeah, I do get angry, and I do get frustrated, but I've got a much more easier journey now, where I can kind of correct myself and understand where I'm at and where I've been, where I was full of hatred as a kid. I hated people that were treating me so badly, and now I've only got love for them, because if you hate people or something, really it's yourself you're hating, and it's a reflection of that. So if you give love out, it's coming back to you.
You mentioned the fact that you said that there was that point where, when all the layers peeled away, that you found happiness at a very low point. Did that happiness stay, or was that a temporary feeling? Because happiness often is a very short time. But was that happiness a foundation and it's remained, and you know how to dip into it again?
Yeah. And I think even from that moment, things got better and better and better, because as a kid and a teenager and a young adult, even up to where I was like in my late 30s, like early 40s, I had such severe anxiety. I couldn't go and chat a girl up. I couldn't tell someone a poem without stuttering and breathing funny and shaking. And I'd found music, because I was using drugs for most of my life just to hide from all the stuff I'd been through. And then I found music, really found it, like, and I suddenly realised I'd written poetry all my life, but I suddenly realised that I wanted to write songs. And I was living in Wales at the time, in South Wales, with my ex-girlfriend, and we just split up. And I had a choice. I could stay there, where it was beautiful to live. There was beautiful scenery, but there was just drugs and alcohol. It was all that was there. And I knew that if I stayed there, I wouldn't last long. I wouldn't be here for long. I died twice already. Once overdose, and once I drowned on my vomit when I tried to stop using drugs. And I bought a cheap second-hand guitar for £10 off another drug user. And I'm left-handed when I play the guitar. I'm right-handed when I write, but I play left-handed for some reason. And I didn't know they made guitars that were left-handed, and every time someone had a guitar, it felt upside down in the wrong way. So then I found out you can get left-handed guitars, and my next-door neighbour had one, and he wanted to sell it, and I'll buy it. So I took it home, and I played one string open, and it done something to me. It was like, it awakened something in me, and I realised, I need to go to London and do music, or I'm going to die. And I have to stop what I'm doing, and this is the only way it's going to save my life. So that's what I've done, and I knew I didn't really have anyone here to rely on that would care for me enough to let me start again. So I kind of knew in my heart that I'd probably end up on the street. But then I thought, you know what, as long as I'm doing the right thing, it don't matter. And if I die, we're all dust in the wind anyway. If I'm doing the right thing for once in my life to give me the love I need to do okay again and be part of the world, then it's all right. And that's what happened. I ended up on the street. I lived in the parks in the summer, and then when it got cold, I found this wooden shed on the back of a squatted pub. And I just put a padlock on it, and I lived in there. There was like thousands and thousands. I've never seen so many rats in all my life. And I knew I went without food and water quite a lot, but twice I went without it for 4 days, and once for 5.5 days. And I knew that you could go without food for a month, maybe 28 days, something like that. But without food and water, you got a week. It's a different thing without both. And it was like I decided that I didn't want to beg. And not because of pride, because my pride was taken from me when I was a kid. I had no pride, no shame. It's like, you took that, I don't need that, you know. It was more to do with that I decided, like, I was testing the universe. I was sort of saying, and I actually said it out loud to it, if you want me here, you got to do something to show me that I'm meant to be here. To show me, otherwise I don't need to be here. It's like I'm not suicidal. I'm not desperate. I'm all right with where I am, but you need to show me. You need to do something. And I kind of made it almost impossible. Like I'd steer away from possible help until one day it was the time I went for 5.5 days, and it was the 6th day of not eating and drinking, and the day before I went out looking for a public toilet just to drink some water out of a sink or something, and I found 3, and 2 of them didn't have any water, and 1 of them didn't have a sink.
It's kind of like comical.
Yeah, it's a joke. It's an absolute
At
joke.
At that point,
Yeah.
surely you turned to the universe and said, "Okay, I get it."
Yeah. It was kind of funny to me, you know. It was ridiculous. I nearly got run over one time because I stopped in the middle of a road. I was crossing the road and saw half a donut, and I stopped and I nearly got hit by a car because I was so tired and just had no energy, and I was hallucinating from not eating. So the next day was the 6th day. I hadn't eaten and drunk anything, and I woke up in the morning and I could barely sit up. And I had a knock on the door, and the shed I lived in was built really badly. So there was big gaps in the wood, and you could see me through it, or I could see out through whoever was there. And it was a community policewoman and a couple of guys stood outside. So that this woman said, "Can you come out?" And I went, No. I went, "You have to stand away from the door and then I'll come out. But I can see you. So if you stand away from the door, then I'll come out." And she went, "Okay." So they stood back. I come out and put the padlock straight on the door. And I went, "What can I do for you?" And these 2 guys were like not looking very nice the way they were looking at me. And the community policewoman said, "Look, you these 2 guys own this premises and you've got to go." And then they butted in and went, "We own this. You have to leave now." And I went, "Well, actually, this is a commercial building. You can't just throw me out." And they said, "No, we've changed it to residential because we're building flats. We're turning it into flats. You got to go now." And I said, "Well, it's the end of November. It's like -2 or something. It was a particularly cold November that year." I said, "When are you starting your building?" And they said, "At the end of January." And I went, "Well, can't I stay here till the end of December?" And they went, "No, you got to go now." So I went, "Well, I wish you and your families a beautiful life. Good luck. I'm going to leave my stuff here because I'm going to go and look for somewhere else because I'm not going to survive in the cold." And I had no energy. I knew without food and water, I wouldn't have survived. It was too cold, you know. So they said I could leave it there and they were going to knock my shed down in the morning. Just to spite me, you know. So, okay, fair enough. So I went out and I looked. I must have done 3 miles. That was all I could manage from sort of 10 in the morning, 10:30 in the morning until 7ish at night.
That still sounds like a lot after not eating and drinking for 6 days.
I mean, I was trying to find something. It wasn't like I'd given up. I felt like I had something I had to do, you know, in this world. So I was trying to find something, and I walked quite a long way, and then I was defeated. I couldn't find nothing. I come back to get my stuff, and I resigned to the fact that I was probably going to die on the street that night. And I got my stuff and I walked past, there was a kebab shop on the corner, just round the corner from where this shed was. And the guy in there was a really nice guy, and he knew me and knew where I was living there. And he always asked me how I was, and you know. And he said to me, "How you doing?" And I went, "Oh, not good, brother. They kicked me out of the shed this morning." And he looked really genuinely scared. Like, he said, no, you can't sleep out there. It's too cold. You're going to die. And I went, I know, but I can't, I haven't got a choice. And he sort of started scanning in the top of his head, and I was thinking, oh no, I don't want him to offer me somewhere to stay. So I went, look, I'm all right, don't worry, bro, everything's all right, it's all right, I'll see you tomorrow. And he went, no, he went, why don't you try and get in the fried chicken restaurant that was a few doors down that had been shut for refurbishment for 2 years. And this is in Muswell Hill. And I said, look, I'm not a burglar. I can't. It's on the main road. Everyone's going to see and hear me. And he said, no. He goes, go round the back. There's a fire escape to like a door, like the cellar. So go round the back. And I went, no, I don't know which one's which. I don't want to get caught breaking into the wrong place, you know. He went, no, go round and I'll point at it and I'll show you. I went, are you sure? And he went, yeah. So I went round the back and he sort of pointed at the staircase and he went back in his kebab shop. Do you mind if I smoke?
No, go for it. Go for it.
So I went and got this metal bar from my shed or some kind of screwdriver thing, and I started trying to get in, and I'm not a burglar. I was making a lot of noise. It was taking a lot of time.
It's kind of like a bad burglary kind of like attempt.
Yes, basically. And I was taking so long, and I said, yeah, someone's going to catch me any minute. And then I remember feeling that someone was there, and I looked round and there was a guy stood there, and he was quite a solid looking dude.
This is when you're still outside or inside?
Yeah, outside.
Outside.
Like trying to get in the fire escape.
The door and kind of like banging on it.
Yeah, trying to open it.
There's a bloke standing behind
and there's
you.
a guy stood there and he had his phone in his hand, and I thought, oh, he's filming me. So I put my hood up and I walked off. And he's gone, hey mate, what are you doing? And I just carried on walking, and he said, oh, don't walk off from me. And I carried on, and he was sort of come round the front of me quickly, but he didn't touch me, but he put his hand out as if to say stop. And he said to me, what are you doing round the back of my nightclub? And I sort of laughed and went, no, I was trying to get in the fried chicken restaurant. And he didn't say anything, but he gave me this look as if to say, what for? There's no chicken in there. It's empty, you know. And I recognised him sort of looking at me like, what? And I went, look, man, I was living in a shed. I'm living on the street. I'm living in that shed there, but they kicked me out this morning, and all I want to do is get out of the cold. I don't want to cause a problem. I'm not here to hurt anyone or upset anyone. I just want to survive, that's all. And he looked deep in my eyes, like, and I knew he was looking for drugs and alcohol. And I knew he knew the streets.
Because he was a nightclub owner, so he would know what he was looking at.
Yeah. And he was a big dude, like, you know, solid guy. And then he goes to me, come with me. And usually I wouldn't have followed someone into a nightclub. And bearing in mind, the nightclub wasn't even open. He had a couple of builders in there. They're doing some decorating. And he'd gone back there for 5 minutes to check on them. So for him to catch me there was crazy. Like a tiny window of time. So he took me in a nightclub, and then he turned around, and I'll never forget it, man. The first thing he said to me is, what do you do? What's your thing? What do you love to do? And I was a bit like, what? Like, as a complete stranger interested in me. And I've just been caught trying to break in. I had a metal bar in my hand, and he's showing me care. And I said, well, I goes like, I wrote poems all my life, but I want to write songs, so I'm teaching myself the guitar because it's the only thing that's going to save me.
And you said that straight up to him, honestly.
Yeah. And then he said to me, like, have you got any drug or alcohol problems? And I said, look, to be honest, I was a drug addict all my life, and I'm on medication at the moment, and I'm reducing because I need to do my music. It's the only thing I need to do. It's going to save me. And he said, tell me one of your poems. So I told him a poem I'd written when I was 14. And for some reason I didn't stutter. And I was all right talking with him. And when I finished this poem, he said to me, he goes, man, if you don't do anything with that, it'd be the biggest crime you ever commit. And I was like, whoa, no one had really encouraged me like that before, so I was a bit taken back. And then he held out £40, and I looked at him like, what do you want from me? And he went, no. He went, take it. He went, get some food or clothes. And then he paused for a moment, and he said to me, actually, I've got somewhere for you to stay. And I'm not joking. It was like, man, 1 minute I was going to die on the street, and I was starving, and I dehydrated, I was hallucinating, and I couldn't even see him properly. And then all of a sudden, this stranger's offering me a chance to have a life, you know. And I said, what, really? And he went, yeah. He goes, go and get your stuff together, and I'm going to come and pick you up. So I went in my shed, and I was a bit in a daze, like, trying to get all my stuff together, and then I looked round, and this like nice 4x4 cart pulled up, and he got out, and he had his two eldest kids with him, and they were like 18 and 19 at the time, a boy and a girl, and they approached me, coming straight up to me with the biggest smiles, holding their hands out. They shook my hand. They looked in my eyes, and they greeted me like I was a member of their family they hadn't seen for years. And I remember like saying hello, shaking them and smiling. And then I looked past them at him, and I thought, man, this guy must be incredible to have kids so judgeless, you know, so beautiful in their hearts. That I'm living in this horrible thing, and they're treating me like I'm one of their family. And so he took me to a really nice 3-bedroom flat in Southgate. And he said to me, look, I've got the lease on this for another year. So it was at the end of November. It was about the 28th, 29th of November. He said, I've got this place till December next year. So you can stay here. He goes, I don't want no rent. I don't want energy bills. Everything's covered. Right? And I'm going to give you a job. Right? So he done that. And he gave me a job in his nightclub. And I worked there and saved up, and I bought my first boat. And he encouraged me to do. He said, look, all I ask from you is that you stay away from the drugs and that, and just concentrate on your music. That's it. And how could I fail? So that's what I've done. And I first of all saved up enough to get a flat, find a flat, like a month's rent and the deposit. And then I saved up, and I bought a beautiful Gibson guitar, which I'd never have been able to afford usually, like. And I worked there, and he gave me the opportunity to be back in society and start remembering who I am and feeling my soul, kind of thing, you know. And him and his half brother, who unfortunately died some years ago, like around lockdown, they gave me all the love and encouragement, and I feel very, very lucky. Like, I'm still in contact with him. He's like very close to me, you know. Like brothers. Like, he was around the same age as me. And he still messages me now, asks me how I'm doing. He watches my band. He helps me with what I want to do with the music and stuff. And so that gave me my life back. And while I was living in this flat, I decided, like, look, if I want to do music and maybe play to people live, I need to break my anxiety. So I made myself go to a poetry reading, and it was a place called the Poetry Cafe in Covent Garden. And I went there, and you had to put your name down, and it'd pay about £2 or something. And then you're on a list, and then they read your name out, and you go down and you read a poem or two out. And there's about 30, 40 seats there with a little stage and a microphone. And so I went there, and it was so full up. I was sitting on the stairs, like, it was people all the way up the stairs, and I was sitting there, and it got to about 2 or 3 people in front of me, and I started shaking, like too anxious. And I left. And I went back to this flat, and I was devastated for 2 weeks, just broken. And then I made myself go back there. And when I went back, the same thing happened. But this time I made myself get on the stage and I told the same poem that I told him. And I stuttered and I was breathing strange and I was shaking all the way through. And when I got to the end, everyone stood up and went crazy, like screaming, shouting, whistling, and I was like, whoa. I tried to get off the stage quickly, and the guy who was hosting it went, whoa, where are you going? And I went, I just want to get, and he went, no, he goes, look, that was amazing. And I went, yeah, but I was really anxious. And he laughed and went, yeah, everyone could see that. That's why it was amazing, because it was impossible for you and you've done it. And it opened something in me. It was like a relief. I could feel this weight. I'm all right. I can be me now. You know, it was like all my life I was not allowed to be me. And I refused to be someone else. But it was like I could suddenly be me without the fight anymore. I was accepted, you know. I want to play a song, right? It's called I Woke Up This Morning. And it's the first song I ever wrote. So I'll get my guitar and I'll tune it. I haven't played it for some time, to be honest, but yeah. Just give it a tune quick. To bed tonight, crying inside. I met an old lady whose son had just died. A soldier abroad, he was sacrificed. He believed their bullshit and he trusted their lies. Happy for his country to send him to die. He lived in a shed and he wakes with a frost. I asked him why he lives in a shed. The government, they don't give a fuck, he said. I asked him if his family would let him stay. And he picked up his guitar and started to play. acting happy and free. But she said her mind had broke from all the insanity. And when it gets too much, she slashes her arms and holds out her hands with pools of blood in her palms. I asked her if her parents knew of her pain. She says they can't feel